Welcome. You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast, the show that cuts through the fog of war and updates you about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts.
Hello, I'm Marina Yevshan, your host of the Russia-Ukraine War Report podcast, and today is September the 13th, 2024. It has been 3,882 days since Russia started covert military operations in Crimea, 10 years and 205 days since the start of the Russia-Ukraine war, 2 years and 202 days since Russia expanded its war of aggression, and 39 days since Ukraine counter-invaded Russia. Today's podcast covers the events that happened from Thursday to Friday morning. You will find the Russia-Ukraine war map helpful to visualize the areas discussed. There is a link in the podcast description, and there are map updates today. The Russia-Ukraine War Report is compiled by our team from around the world. Today's report includes information from our direct contacts and journalists in Ukraine, the Russian Ministry of Defense, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine morning reports, operational commands north, south, and east of Ukraine, open source intelligence, Iron House team of analysts and geospatial experts, and pro-Ukrainian and pro-Russian male bloggers and social media channels with a track record of trying to be accurate. We have one mission, the truth, because the truth matters. Here is my daily assessment. There are only small changes from yesterday, so if you want to skip ahead, I won't mind. I won't even know. 1. The lack of a meaningful response by Ukraine's allies to open and unrestricted attacks on civilians and civilian infrastructure by Russia has convinced Moscow this is an effective strategy with no political consequences. 2. Russia will maintain its attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, continuing Russian crimes against humanity that started in October 2022, as outlined in 4 arrest warrants issued by the International Criminal Court. 3. Continued attacks on Ukraine's energy infrastructure have caused critical damage, creating an environment where an accident at one or more of Ukraine's nuclear power plants is possible. 4. The unwillingness of the Biden administration to permit Ukraine to use provided weapons for strikes more than 40 kilometers from the 1991 state border with Russia has forced Ukraine to develop its own deep strike capabilities, proving that escalation threats from Moscow are hollow. 5. The policy of escalation management implemented by the NATO alliance and the United States, and to a small extent Germany, is a complete failure that only encourages Russian acts of aggression, including more frequent and deeper violations of NATO alliance airspace, attacks on commercial shipping, attacks on internationally recognized NGOs, and acts of espionage in Europe and North America. 6. The failed policies of the NATO alliance are increasing the probability of a significant international incident, nuclear proliferation, and an expansion of the Russia-Ukraine war into the European continent. 7. Despite Russia's localized counteroffensive, Moscow has no strategic reserve available to mount an effective defense of the Kursk region, continues to suffer unsustainable losses, and has committed almost all of its available conventional forces in Ukraine. 8. We maintain the Kursk counter-invasion is strategically sound. 9. Autocrat Vladimir Putin's order to recapture the Kursk region of Russia by October the 1st is unrealistic and unlikely. 10. The Russian economy is much weaker than reported. 11. Persistent delays in the delivery of promised military hardware, munitions and funding continue to prevent the Ukrainian armed forces from reaching their full combat potential. 12. We maintain the world is caught in the mutually assured destruction instability paradox. Yesterday, Russia launched 26 Shahed-136 one-way drones, with 24 shot down and 1 disabled by electronic warfare. The attacks damaged electrical infrastructure in 6 regions. Herman Galushchenko, Ukraine's Minister of Energy, warned that the continued attacks on electrical substations could cause a nuclear emergency, as we have warned for over a year. Quote, "They know exactly what they are doing. It is no coincidence that they are attacking substations critical to nuclear safety." During the attack, a Shahed-136 drone flew in close proximity to the Khmelnytsky nuclear power plant. At the time of publication, the International Atomic Energy Agency had not released a statement. I could point out the bias of how quickly the IAEA condemns any drone activity near the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, but I won't. In the Dnipropetrovsk Oblast, Russian forces shelled a Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate in Nikopol. Firefighters heroically tried to save the building, fighting the fire from within the chapel until the roof collapsed. We'll link to the video in today's situation report. There's more information in the podcast description. And if you're a firefighter, you'll understand why I used the word heroically. Russian attacks also caused moderate damage to a church in Kryvyi Rih. Throughout the day yesterday, missiles, drone and airstrikes on civilians and civilian infrastructure killed at least 9 and wounded 40. The dead included 3 employees of the International Committee of the Red Cross, who died when Russia attacked a humanitarian aid convoy in the settlement of Virolubivka. The ICRC released a brief statement on Twitter, also known as X, quote, "3 of our staff members in Ukraine were killed today after shelling hit the site of a planned frontline aid distribution in the Donetsk region, and 2 more colleagues were wounded. Our hearts are broken as we mourn this loss and care for the injured." The social media post received a community note for leaving out the part about Russia attacking the convoy. The Red Cross later reported that 2 more employees were injured, with ICRC President Mirjana Shpolyarich writing, quote, "I condemn attacks on Red Cross personnel in the strongest terms. It's unconscionable that shelling would hit an aid distribution site." Russia used Smerch rockets with cluster munitions to attack residential areas in the settlement of Borova in the Kharkiv Oblast, which killed 2 and wounded 7, including 3 firefighters, in an apparent double-tap attack. On Thursday, Russia carried out 143 discrete assaults, and through September the 12th, the 7-day moving average for daily attacks dropped to 154. In the Kursk region, Ukraine controls 1,164 square kilometers, with another 423 in the grey zone, for a total area of 1,589 square kilometers. The breach is 96 kilometers wide, with a depth of up to 33 kilometers. Ukraine controls 94 hamlets, villages, settlements and tactically significant areas, such as the Gazprom gas compressor and metering station at Sudzha. Of those, 33 settlements are under full administrative control. The Glushkovsky salient, where 2,500 to 3,000 Russian troops are isolated, is 443 square kilometers. Let's go into the details of what happened on the battlefield. This would be a good time to open up the war map on a second device and find the city of Sumy, that's in northeastern Ukraine. There is a link to the map in the podcast description. Ready? Here we go. We begin in the Kursk region of Russia, in the Glushkovsky area of operation, or AO. Russian sources shared a video of a drone strike in Tetkina, 200 meters across the 1991 border, on a claimed Ukrainian position. The map was adjusted to show the small Ukrainian advance. Another video showed Ukrainian combat engineers breaching part of the first echelon of the Prigozhin line near Pavlivka. Ukraine lost a demining vehicle, but Russian forces were unable to stop the breach. We link to almost all the videos I mentioned during the podcast in today's situation report, along with other resources like the order of battle and tracking Russian versus Ukrainian equipment losses. When you become a subscriber for just $5 a month, you gain access to all of our research. There's more information in the podcast description. 3 independent Ukrainian and Russian sources reported that Ukrainian forces captured Novy Put, advanced north to the southern edge of Vysolia, and captured Obukhovka, that's the one in the Glushkovsky district. Geolocated video confirmed that Ukrainian forces were just south of Obukhovka. Russian sources reported that attempts to repulse the Ukrainian advance failed, and Ukrainian troops were digging in near Veselaya. We adjusted the map. There continued to be reports of fighting in or near Medvezhye and Politodelsky, including from the Russian Ministry of Defense or Armored, and additionally in Sergeyevka. While all the claims included pictures and videos, none of them could be geolocated. NASA Fire Information for Resource Management Systems, or FIRMS, has shown fires in Kulbaki for 2 days, suggesting fighting has been ongoing. North of Glushkovo, a Russian platoon crossing an engineered bridge over the same river was attacked by 2 M30 rockets with cluster munitions, causing significant casualties and sinking the bridge. In a separate attack near the same location, a Russian Zemlyedelye remote mining system was hit by an M31 rocket, destroying the system and causing the mines to scatter and cook off. In the Korenevo AO, cloud cover blocked the Sentinel-2LA satellite pass and limited geospatial intelligence from NASA firms. After 3 days of fighting, Russian troops raised a flag in the center of Snagost. A Russian assault at the 344th kilometer place train station was stopped by the Ukrainian 501st Separate Naval Infantry Battalion with the support of drones. Drone video showed Russian forces clearing their homes in northern Krasnooktyabrsky, where Ukrainian forces abandoned a Max Pro mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicle. There was a small break in the clouds over Viktorovka and Vnyazapne during the Sentinel-2LA satellite pass, which showed no evidence of additional fighting between September the 10th and the 12th. Armored claimed that Apanasovka, Byakhovo, Vishnevka, Viktorovka, Vnyazapne, Gordeevka, Krasnooktyabrsky, Obukhovka, that's the one near Korenevo, Snagost, and 10th October were captured. Of those, there has only been visual evidence or 3 independent reports for Krasnooktyabrsky and Snagost. Russian mercenary mail blogger Rybar claimed without evidence that Ukrainian forces were pushed out of Byakhovo, Gordeevka, Vnyazapne, and Viktorovka. After the armored report, some Russian sources reported that Obukhovka, again that's the one by Korenevo, was captured, while Ukrainian sources reported that Russian troops had been pushed out. NASA firms has shown fires in the settlement since September the 10th. The only other reports were from Russian sources claiming fighting continued north of Volgovka. There continues to be a significant fog of war on the scope and scale of the Russian counteroffensive. If there are major changes over the weekend, the team will issue a flash report to our subscribers, or if you can wait, I'll catch you up on Monday. In the Sudzha AO, a Russian infantry fighting vehicle entered the southern part of Ruskaya Konopelka and fired into Ukrainian positions, confirming that Ukrainian forces still occupied part of the settlement. Russian sources also reported fighting continued in the areas of Fanaseevka and Cherkasskaya Konopelka. In the Sumy Oblast of Ukraine, near Yampil, a Russian airstrike killed a civilian. The VKS also bombed the Ohtyrka nursing home for the elderly and persons with disabilities, killing 2 patients. Viktor Tokarev, the director of the nursing home, said that patients were in the assembly hall at the time of the attack, and the windows were blown out. Attacks on medical facilities, even if soldiers are patients, is a war crime. In the war crime department for Russia, there's another rock layer to dig through today, later in the podcast. Moving to theater-wide events in the Russian theater of war, during a joint press conference with Lithuanian President Gitanas Nausėda, President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said that the Russian counteroffensive, quote, is going in accordance with the Ukrainian plan. He didn't clarify if this was due to Russia pulling resources from Ukraine or if this was part of an operational plan. It is clear that Ukrainian forces are attacking the Russian flank in the Glushkovo district and have established at least 2 new positions over the Russian border. The Russian ambassador to Italy was summoned to the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs on Thursday due to the criminal charges placed against Stefania Battistini, a journalist from Rai TV. Battistini was among the first Western journalists to enter Sudzha after Ukrainian forces occupied the settlement. Moscow has placed 7 journalists on the wanted list, including reporters from CNN, Deutsche Welle, and Ukrainian journalists Natalia Nahorna, Diana Butsko, and Olesya Borovik. A Russian civilian living under occupation introduced himself to Ukrainian troops, thinking they were NATO forces from the United States. He walked up with a big smile and said, quote, "So very nice. Yes, from America?" The Ukrainian soldier tells the man he is from Zhytomyr, leaving the civilian in shock. Russian state media has repeated the false claim that Russian forces are fighting against American, British, French, Polish, and other Western nations. The Russian government announced that it would compensate citizens who lost all their property in the Kursk Oblast with a one-time payment of 150,000 rubles, about $1,650.
You're listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. Our team of journalists, researchers, and analysts is funded by readers, listeners, and viewers just like you. To support independent journalism, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on patreon.com/malcontentnews.
It's time to talk about my home, Ukraine. Beginning in the Kharkiv Oblast in the Liptsev-Ovchansk, significant fighting was limited to Vovchansk. In the Kupiansk, Russian forces advanced from Sinkivka to the northwestern edge of Petropavlivka. While the attack was ultimately repulsed, a Russian soldier committing the war crime of perfidy was over 1,200 meters from the previously known position. The soldier pretended to surrender and then attempted to conceal a grenade that he planned to use on Ukrainian troops. The soldier was eliminated. We'll link to the video, but be warned, it's very graphic. The map was adjusted to show the new Russian advance. Russian attempts to advance in the direction of Glushkivka and Kolesnikivka were repulsed, as were attempts to advance toward Lozova from occupied Novoselivsk. The Ukrainian air forces bombed a Russian ammunition depot in the occupied Nova Tarasivka using United States-provided GBU-39 small-diameter bombs. In the Luhansk Oblast, west of occupied Svatove, fighting continued in the southern part of Stelmachivka, and Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the direction of Druzhelyubivka. West of Kremenna, Russian forces entered an operational pause, with fighting reported east of Nevsk. Overnight, air defenses were active in the occupied city of Luhansk. There was no other information on what was being shot at or if anything was hit. You know what Russia said. Say it with me. All objects intercepted. Moving on to the Donbas, where we start in the northeastern part of the Donetsk Oblast. Beginning in the Siverskoye, Russian forces continued their operational pause. The only reports of fighting were in western Zolotarivka. In the Kostiantynivka, fighting continued along the Siversky Donetsk-Donbas Canal in Kalynivka and the western edges of the canal district of Chasiv Yar. Russian forces also attempted to expand the area of control in the forests west and southwest of Ivanivsk without success. In the Toretsk-New York, Russian forces made new advances, moving up to 200 meters in Toretsk in the area of Dzerzhinsky Street. Fighting continued southwest of Zalizne, with Russian troops trying to advance into Nelipivka and in the southern part of New York, where Russian troops are trying to regain their lost positions. In southwestern Donetsk Oblast, Russian forces continued their attempts to advance in the Pokrovsk AO, with the number of attacks a third lower than a week ago. I know this is getting repetitive. Ukrainian forces continued to hold the northern flank, repulsing attacks in the direction of Zelene Pole, Vozdvizhenka, Myrolubivka and Krasny Yar, and in Hrodivka and Novogrodivka. Fighting continued in Marinivka and in central Mikhailivka, where the situation has improved slightly. In the Kurakhove AO, Russia carried out 64 assaults. There were no changes in the situation in Ukrainsk, Dolynivka and Galitsinivka. Russian forces advanced from occupied Krasnogorivka in the directions of Alexandropol and Gostre. The advance toward Alexandropol on the south bank of the Lozova River was unsuccessful. The attack on Gostre involved a battalion of mechanized infantry, with the settlement defended by the Ukrainian 46th Brigade. Approximately 60 vehicles, over 40 armored, were involved in the assault, advancing up to 4 kilometers. 15 tanks, infantry fighting and armored personnel carriers were destroyed, and another 11 were disabled, forcing the Russian column to retreat. Russian forces reportedly could not consolidate their gains in the village, and the remaining light infantry was attacked by artillery and one-way drones. We link to 2 videos, one of the assault and another showing the village being cleared. Further south, fighting continued in western Georgievka and Kostiantynivka, with no change in the situation. In the Vuhledar AO, the VKS heavily bombed the Pivdenno-Donbaska coal mine number 3, northeast of occupied Vodyane, likely setting conditions for an attempt to encircle Vuhledar from the north. Fighting continued in the area of Pivdenno-Donbaska coal mine number 1 and west of Prechistevka. Off the coast of Romania, in its exclusive economic zone, the Belize-owned St. Kitts and Nevis flagged and Turkish-operated MV Aya was hit by a Russian Kh-22 anti-ship missile launched by a Tu-22 M3 bomber, causing significant damage. Approximately 55 kilometers from Sfântu Gheorghe, Romania, the cargo ship carrying 26,500 metric tons of grain bound for Egypt was hit on the port side amidships, damaging a loading crane and cargo hold. The Kh-22 anti-ship missile uses a ballistic trajectory during its terminal phase, reaching a speed of Mach 4.6 and delivering a 1,000-kilogram warhead. Naval experts told our team that the Aya likely didn't sink due to its cargo, which cushioned the impact. None of the 23 crew members were wounded. The captain requested to transit to the Romanian port of Constanta and was approved. At the time of publication, the Aya spent hours drifting, briefly sailed on a southwestern course, and then started drifting again. The AIS data suggests the damage is more severe than first reported. The Romanian government condemned the attack, calling it a, quote, unprecedented escalation of Russia's illegal and unjustified war against Ukraine. Deliberately attacking a cargo ship is a serious violation of international humanitarian legal norms governing the conduct of war at sea. Unlike the repeated violations of Romanian airspace, which Bucharest has labeled as unintentional, the Foreign Ministry called the attack on the MV Aya deliberate. The United Nations and the United States also condemned the attack. At the time of publication, there were no official statements from Belize, Turkey, Egypt or St. Kitts. The attack on the Turkish-operated vessel came the day after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan declared, quote, "Our support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty and independence is unwavering. The return of Crimea to Ukraine is a requirement of international law." On August the 23rd, Ukraine attacked occupied Crimea with Neptune ER surface-to-surface, with Russian officials claiming all missiles were intercepted. You know where this is going. A Russian video of the incident leaked onto the internet and showed that at least 2 cruise missiles hit an S-400 air defense system. We end today's podcast with my Theaterwide update. In response to the question about strikes with long-range weapons on Russian territory, Russian autocrat Vladimir Putin said that this would mean direct involvement of NATO countries in the war, claiming that their use, quote, is beyond the capability of the Ukrainian army. This is only possible with the use of intelligence data from satellites, which Ukraine doesn't possess. If you need a translation, here it is. If Ukraine starts using elite-provided weapons to strike Russia, we don't have much to work with because our S-400 air defense system has shown to be somewhat ineffective. So all I've got left is threatening to go to war against NATO, although I already told my people for over 2 years we're already at war with NATO, so much so that they're convinced we are fighting the Americans already. It's another fake red line. And, by the way, beyond the capability of Ukrainians, aren't you the same autocrat who leads a country that is so technologically superior to Ukraine that you were forced to get missiles from North Korea and Iran? I digress. The United Kingdom has sent counter-terrorism investigators to Gibraltar to investigate further the untimely death of the Telegraph journalist David Knowles. Knowles was the host of the Ukraine the Latest podcast and died of a heart attack while on vacation. He was only 32. And finally, Romania announced it has started training Ukrainian F-16 pilots. And that's what we know. Join me again on Monday, and we'll do it all over again. Your support of my home, Ukraine, helps us make history and protect the future for all.
You've been listening to the Malcontent News Russia-Ukraine War podcast. To help keep us independent, please consider providing financial support by becoming a patron. Want on-demand news in your hand? Download the Google News app and make Malcontent News one of your favorites to receive breaking news updates. Thank you for listening.